So those discrepancies can readily be resolved if we assume that somehow we can generate a super acceleration at very early time, which is basically followed by this decelerating phases. Okay, then that super acceleration basically takes care of all those puzzling features of our Big Bang cosmology, and which naturally boils down to what you get in our Big Bang cosmology as soon as you reach that last cutting surface. Okay, so last cutting surface is what you get, and right now we are discussing physics which is beyond last cutting surface. Okay, so now, so that is the prescription, and we have seen that most of the puzzles can be solved. We are just left with one puzzle, that is the structure formation problem. And as I promised, I will discuss that structure formation problem can also be resolved in this inflationary paradigm. Not only that, that inflationary paradigm is the most natural explanation which basically provides the seeds of fluctuations which you see as large-scale perturbations. Okay, that is the point I am going to discuss rigorously. But before doing that, let us just propose. So what do you mean by somehow? That you will have to provide a prescription by which you can choose a suitable form of T mu nu which can result in an accelerating solution. Not only that, a super accelerating solution, so to say. Okay, and first we tried with a constant to make our life simple, but we have seen that that doesn't work. Okay. Then we are left with more difficult solutions, and the more difficult choices are, you consider a single scalar field, you consider a multiple scalar field, like you have more than one scalar fields. You consider, so these are canonical scalar fields, like you have kinetic term plus potential term sitting over here. But you can choose there are non-canonical scalar fields like tachyons and everything. Okay, when the kinetic and potential term, they are jumped up. Okay, you can choose that thing as well. You can consider vector fields, you can consider tensor fields, you can consider say Church scalar fields, so on and so forth. Okay, so it depends on how much complications you welcome in your life, but you can consider anything. And you can go on practicing all those things. So your basic target is to extract physics out of these set. So these, not these set of equations. Depending on what you choose, your right hand side will change. Okay, but finally you will have these more or less this set of equations, and you will have to extract physics out of that. And it turns out that choosing a single scalar field, single chargeless scalar field, not only keeps your life simple, but also this is most consistent with observation. So that is why I say single scalar field with canonical terms, okay, they are canonically related, like you have kinetic and potential term. If you have like this is the most acceptable theory, and we are basically considering that. Okay, fine. So given the scenario to get is that if you consider a scalar field, then you can write down readily the Lagrangian and everything. So in turn, which will basically in turn give you the density and pressure term, which you write down over here, and your set of equations which are governing the inflation, that basically boils down to this, where these two are your Friedman equation, and this is a supplementary equation which comes from energy conservation, which I call kinetic Klein-Gordon. Okay, fine. So that's it. So now, as you see, as I already discussed, that these set of equations, they are usually complicated because they are not only second order but also non-linear. Okay. But at the same time, now your life is even more complicated because in the right hand side, if you choose standard model field, then you know how do they evolve. Okay, you know what is their variation with scale factor. So you put that value over here, and that basically makes your life a little bit simple. But here your life is a little bit difficult. Why? Because you have to choose a complicated form of d phi. You don't know a priori how does it vary with scale factor. Okay, that is your job. Okay. So you will have to choose a specific form of d phi, and in general that functional form is difficult. So if you choose that value, you will have to solve these equations explicitly, and in most of the cases that is not possible. But at the same time, that is not desired either, because your job is to not, as I am trying to point out time and again, your job is not to find out exact solutions, but to extract out physical information somehow or other. Okay, so now let us discuss how we can extract physics out of this. Okay, so you have this set of equations. Where is the vector? Okay. And let me, okay, thanks for this moment. So what you do is that you choose, first of all, you choose that your scalar field basically that is slowly, so this is just a choice and it happens to be slow, that this choice is pretty consistent with observation. Okay, what is that choice? You choose that your scalar field is basically slowly rolling down the potential. Okay, so what do you choose? You choose that. So if you draw a plot between phi and your phi, okay, then you choose a potential in such a way that the potential looks something like this, and you have this scalar field sitting over here, okay, which is a unstable position. So it will try to come down to the stable position, which is its minimum. Okay, so this scalar field basically slowly rolls down the potential to its minimum. Okay, and because of these dynamics, basically the universe evolves. So this is the prescription that you choose. So this is the prescription. You choose that phi basically slowly rolls down the potential. Rolls down the okay, to its minimum. Fine. So if you choose this thing, then you can readily say out of these equations, you can drop some of the terms. What are the terms? If this happens to be shown, if phi has to slowly roll down the potential, then what could you say? First of all, the kinetic time is negligible compared to the potential. Okay. So the first and foremost point is that you can say this results in phi dot squared, which is 2 less than 3. And at the same time, you can say there is another constraint sitting over here, that is phi double dot. This term is once again 2 less than 3 prime. So these are the two conditions which basically confirm this scenario that the scalar field, so under these constraints, the scalar field can in fact readily roll down the potential very slowly. This is the point, very slowly. Okay. So these two constraints you can write down in a different language. You can readily check that you can define two new parameters. Okay. So what you can do first and foremost, if you consider these things. So let us, as I said, if you use any two of these three equations, it is sufficient because the system is closed. Okay. So for this moment, let us forget about the second equation. Okay. And we will just deal with these two equations. That's it. And here you see that I can drop this term and I can drop this term as well. Okay. So let's just drop this term and let's drop this. This already makes your life much simpler. Okay. So now what you get is that these two constraints can readily be rewritten in a different form. What is that form? You can readily say that if this constraint has to be satisfied, you can readily check that thing. Okay. So what are the scenarios? The scenario is that you can define two parameters, epsilon and eta, okay, which you can write as mp squared, where mp squared is 1 by 8 pi g, you know that thing, okay? So sometimes I will use 8 pi g explicitly and sometimes I will use mp, okay? Have in your back of your mind that mp squared is 1 by 8 pi g, that's it, okay? So I define two new parameters which are mp squared by 2 v prime by v whole squared. This is one parameter, and another parameter eta is mp squared v double prime by v. Prime is with respect to the scalar field phi. Okay. Okay. So these two conditions readily tells you that these two parameters basically they are 2 less than 3. Okay. So first of all, why I write them down in this form? Because as I said, these constraints, basically with these constraints you can drop this phi dot squared term. Now to answer to his questions, how you will choose v phi? First and foremost, you will have to be very clever. You will have to choose v phi in such a way that they already satisfy these constraints. Okay, you choose v phi in such a way that v prime by v multiplied by this, that is 2 less than 1, and v double prime by v multiplied this, that is 2 less than 1. That actually guarantees that you are on the right track. Okay, so if you choose a potential in such a way that they satisfy these two constraints, then you can say that you are on the right track, and that will most probably lead to a successful model of inflation. Okay, so this is first of all how you can choose your potential. So given this and the scenario, okay, so given these and these two parameters, they are basically called, since they are related to this slow roll condition, they are called slow roll parameters. Okay, So since you do not have, so why I do this thing? Because since you do not have any a priori information about phi dot square and phi double dot, all the information you have is about b phi. Okay, so you just check whether these two conditions are satisfied instead of checking these two conditions. Okay, and they are identical as I say. So you just check, you define two scroll parameters and you check if that two scroll parameters they are pretty less than 1. Okay. You also have, let me just mention over here, you also have other two scroll parameters, but I am not mentioning them right now. Okay. So right now we are focusing on these two scroll parameters. So if you do that thing, then your Friedmann equations they are already much simplified. Then you can write down your Friedmann equation as, first and foremost, your h squared is almost equal to, I can write down as this is, okay, so this is 1 by 3 mk squared into v, okay, and the second equation is this, okay. So this is the second equation, fine. So now your job is much simple, okay. You have two unknowns and two equations. One unknown is phi, another unknown is a. You have two unknowns and two equations, which are more or less simple. You can try to have a solution. Okay. So first and foremost, this is the step. But then the question, okay. So then the question that appears is, I mean, somebody asked me this question yesterday. That so I like to guarantee that at some stage this inflation ends, and you get back your standard radiation doubling area. Okay, so how you can choose that point? Okay, so when does inflation ends? Okay, so this is the next question. So first and foremost, so let us just bring home the basic points here. So the basic points is that first of all you write down your all those Friedmann equations, and then you choose your potential in such a way that they satisfy these two floral conditions. This guarantees that you can have actually a super accelerated solution at very early time. Okay, and now you sit down and try to calculate, try to solve these two equations to extract out physics. Okay, that's the other issue. But now the major issue is that when does inflation end so that you get the observable universe? Okay, because as you know, inflationary era was a very short period during which universe expanded very, very fast. Okay, but then it boils down to your radiation doubling era. Okay. So when does inflation end? So this is a very fundamental question. So now let us get back to your good old horizon problem. What was your horizon problem? Okay, the horizon size dh, T decoupling, that can be written as a T decoupling, and then dh T decoupling. Okay. And as we have already shown that if you have a super accelerated expansion at early time, then this quantity is large. Okay. This quantity is large. We have guaranteed that thing with a variables t power p. You can remember that thing, no? A variables t power p with p greater than 1. Okay. So this quantity is large, and we have claimed that we have super acceleration at early time. So that means this quantity is huge, which basically results in a huge size of horizon. Okay, that's fine. But what do I mean by huge? A term huge doesn't make sense unless you estimate that. I have avoided that part up now. Okay, now I'll try to focus on what do I mean by huge. How much should be the exact amount of expansion? So right now the point is that, so this is a T decoupling. So the point we're trying to focus on is that we have started with a small scale factor, okay? And during this very short interval, during inflation, these scale factor become huge. So how much, by how much amount this has actually expanded? If you want to take care of this horizon problem, then you can see that the amount of inflation that should be there, that is the horizon, that is the scale factor, should increase by a factor of e power 56 to 70. So this is what you can get from thermal history of the universe. Okay, this should be the amount so that your horizon size is really huge, and during that time the photons can get thermally stabilized. Okay. So this is what you will get from here. So this is the amount, and this is basically required to solve this problem, solve the horizon problem. So what does it mean? This basically means very important information. This basically carries. What is that information? The information is that even if universe has started with a very small scale factor, very small size, so to say, loosely speaking. Okay. During this very short interval, its size has increased to an enormous amount. Okay. So that it has started with a power t, and after inflation, when the inflation ends, its size has become exponential around 70 times of its initial size. So it's that much big, it needs to be that much big if you want to resolve those puzzles of quantified cosmology. Okay, that's why I say this should be huge, really, really huge. Only having just a large value will not do. Okay, even if you had a scenario that this is large and this is large, then also you could not have solved this scenario, because then also photons would not get sufficient time to get thermally stabilized. Okay, so this must be really, really huge, and the quantity amount is this. Okay. So now this is a huge quantity. So if you want to do numerical calculations and everything, if you want to estimate, then this huge quantity is really troublesome. Okay. Okay. So because of that, let me once again do some clever manipulations over here, and instead of estimating this quantity, as I said, in physics you always try to estimate those quantities which are basically tractable. Okay. So instead of directly estimating these quantities, what you do is that you just take logarithm of both sides. Okay. And define this new quantity, logarithmic of this, as a quantity which you will basically measure. As I said, so is the logic clear to everybody? Okay, this is a huge number, so measuring this number, this huge number, is really difficult when you try to do numericals. Okay, so what you do is that you take logarithm of both sides and define this new quantity as n, which I call number of E foldings. Why E foldings? Just because you have exponential over here. So this is just a name, forget about that thing. Okay, so I define a new quantity, and now I say that this new quantity, if its value is 56 to 70, you are taking logarithm of exponential, that will boil down to 56 to 70. So if your value is this, you can solve the horizon problem. So now what you can see that, so your job is more or less done. Okay, fine. So I'll come to that point later on. Okay, fine. So now you can, so in principle your job is done. You can claim that your universe has started with a very small value of n. Okay, so when your universe size was just a, then this quantity was e power 0, so your n was 0. So you start from n equals 0. Okay, and during that very short interval, n basically grows from 0 to little bit higher values. As soon as it reaches a value of 56 to 70, you can say that now my inflation should end. Because whatever job it has to do, it has done that job. It has solved all those puzzles. So now inflation ends, and now you can say that somehow that inflaton field, okay, that should turn into smaller fields, which you see in nature. Okay, so this last sentence I will explain in structure formation. Okay, at this point you can say, so as soon as this E foldings value that reaches your 56 to 70 value, you can say my inflation is set. Okay. But how you can express this thing in terms of scalar field? Because now your input is scalar field phi. So you have to express this n when you do calculation. How you can check that whether your n is 56 to 70 or not? How you can check that thing? So you will have to relate your number of E foldings with scalar field. Okay. So now let us do that mathematical manipulation. So this is all about physics. Okay. Everything else is mathematical manipulation. Now we are trying to find out the end of inflation error in terms of the scalar field, which is the basic input in the theory right now. Okay. So what you do is that you just do some mathematical manipulations. Once again, you can check that dn. So n is defined as ln a t decoupling by a di. Okay. So take derivative of n dn that will give you minus D ln A. I'm not showing you how you can get these things, you can just readily check. This is simple algebra, okay? Simple calculus, so to say. Okay. And you can readily check, this is basically H dt, you write down A as, H as A dot by A, you can readily check that this is equal to H dt, and in terms of phi, you can readily check that this is nothing but, if this is H dt, then you can write down it as H phi dot into d phi. Okay. H dt I write down as H dt d phi into d phi. Okay. And that gives you this. This readily relates, but this is a very important result because this readily relates your number of foldings with the scalar field, which is the primary input of the theory. Okay. So now you can integrate both sides, which will give you n. So if you integrate both sides, that will give you n as function of phi. Okay. So this is, if I write, so h, you know how much is h? You have already simplified that thing. Okay. H square is mp square by 3 into v. Okay. So you write down all those things over here. And phi dot is how much? You have already also simplified that using the second equation. Okay, the second equation gives you phi dot. If you put that value of h and phi dot over here, this equation turns out to be 1 by mp square v by v prime d phi. You are starting from phi I, you are ending at phi end. Phi I corresponds to ATI and phi n corresponds to AT. Okay. So this is the initial value of the scalar field when the inflation has just started. Okay. And that is the final value of the scalar field when inflation has just started. Okay. So that at t. Okay. And you can also write down, once again you can just do mathematical jugglery over here and you can write that down once again as this is 1 by mp squared. I have defined the flow rule parameters. Okay. The first flow rule parameter is v prime by v into mp squared. So I can write that down in terms of flow rule parameters as well. And this will give you phi I to phi f d phi by okay. So now what is your job? Your job is to propose a potential. Okay.
Sir, I could not understand that last term, sir. How h by phi dot?
This term?
No, no, sir.
This term?
First term. H by phi dot d phi.
This term?
Yes.
This term is pretty easy. This is h dt, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you write down as h. So you write down as h d phi dt into d phi, and that will basically give you this thing. Okay. Okay. So now your job is pretty simple. As I said, first and foremost. So this basically, as I said, the first part basically guarantees that you are on the right track, and this will confirm that you will actually be able to propose a successful model of inflation. So what are the three conditions you have to take care of first and foremost? Okay. So the first point is that you cleverly choose a v phi. Okay. And then you check whether that v phi has such a form that you can satisfy epsilon 2 less than 1 and eta 2 less than 1 at early time at phi equals phi I. Okay. You choose that thing. And finally you check that if there is such a phase that your n is of the order of 56 to 70, or which in turn basically tells you your epsilon is of the order of 1. So you can check as soon as your number of foldings value reaches 56 to 70, or your epsilon value that reaches 1, you can say that now my inflation is X. Okay. So now you can be happy. You can say that I have given a successful. So is the point clear to everybody? Is the logic clear? Okay. So first of all, you will have to take care of two things. First of all, you will have to guarantee that you are actually having a super acceleration at very early time. Okay. This one basically guarantees that thing, this condition. But at the same time, you will have to guarantee that inflation has ended at a specific epoch. unless you can guarantee that you are in direct conflict with observation, because observation basically tells you that inflation has ended at very early time. Okay, at very early time you see radiation stability data after that. Okay, so this quantity basically takes care of that information as well. So these two conditions taken together basically guarantees that you do have a successful model of inflation. Not only that, that inflation basically ends at some point. Okay, and that point is consistent with observation, because once you get 56 to 70, then it guarantees that whatever you see in last scattering surface, before that inflation. Okay, is it clear to everyone? So now let us, before going to the, as I said, before going into the structure formation and everything, let us do a simple calculation and let us check how you can do that. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how you can do that, and in fact, you will have to believe me that in literature you have lots of different models of inflation. So no matter, so these steps may look, yeah, any question? Okay. Might be. I mean, sometimes I miss those factors and everything. So you just take care of those things. So what you do is that don't you just do all those calculations and there might be surprise. So thanks for pointing it out. Okay. Okay. So now it may so appear that these steps are really complicated. How from where I can get a potential which basically gives to this and everything. Okay, but you will have to believe me. In literature, there are lots of descriptions. So there are lots of models, lots of potential, so to say, which basically can give rise to successful model. So far as we have discussed it today. Okay. So I will give you a very simple prescription, very simple model, by which I can show you that you actually have a successful model of inflation. But doing structure formation after that is really important because of two reasons. Okay. First and foremost, as I said, the most crucial point over here is to show you how from an initial homogeneous and isotropic universe you can indeed get this inhomogeneities to describe that thing which is being reflected in the same. Okay. So this is the point I will have to add this, but at the same time, as I have already told you, there are hundreds and thousands of inflationary models. But since your universe is unique, you can't have to explain one thing, you can't have hundreds and thousands models. That is not really good. So you have to discriminate among those models and you will have to appreciate some models and rule out the others. These observational aspects, this structure formation basically helps us in doing so. Okay. So whatever we have discussed up to now, so these are sort of some tests through which your model building should pass. Okay. Once you are satisfied with these three simple tests, then you can see lots of, so this is a huge window, lots of models passes through that window. Okay. And if you, I mean, on top of that, if you add your structure formation idea, which I will discuss right now, if you add your structure formation information and observable features with this, then you can see the observable window is really small. So that lots of models are actually ruled out. Okay, and now we are pretty confident that we are really on the right side. So nowadays, so before say around 30 years back, people used to satisfy these conditions, these three conditions, and they used to be pretty happy. Yeah, we have done a great job because we have given a model of inflation. But today your job is really difficult because while proposing an inflationary model, you will have to not only pass through these three tests, but at the same time you will have to pass through structure formation information test. Okay. So this is the point people usually miss in say while starting their research in this field, that they are most of the time satisfied with these things, but these things are not sufficient actually. Okay. It may so happen, and in many cases it happens that even if you satisfy these three conditions, you fail in explaining structure formation. So once you try to propose inflation, you will have to take care of structure formation information as well. Okay, and then only you can say that you are actually giving a successful model. Okay, but right now let us focus on this thing, and then I will come to that structure formation part. So let us do a simple example. Okay. Is the point clear to everybody? Okay. So let us propose a potential, which I call a power law potential. Okay, so the potential basically looks like lambda by p, mp power 4, phi by mp power 4. Okay, and you can readily check that for p equals 2, this is basically mp square by 2 phi square, and for p equals 4, this is lambda by 4 phi 4. Okay, and these are pretty well known potential. This is the quadratic potential, and this is the quartic potential. Okay, these are pretty well known. Those who know about say quantum field theory, you know that these two potentials are really popular. This is the quadratic potential which you, in most of the cases you take care of in quantum field theory. And if you add that with quadratic potential, this is what you get, the potential for Higgs. Okay. But in general, we will keep it like this so that we can take any integral value, so to say. Okay. And we will try to solve this thing and let's say. Okay. Though there are restrictions that p greater than 4 is really problematic, because you will have other problems. Like the part I am not discussing, quantum field theory part. Okay. If p is greater than 4, then you have problem with but you should know these names. Okay, these are important. You will have problems with reannulation and everything. Sorry, forget about that thing. Renormalization and everything. This basically you will have unavoidable divergences in the theory. Okay, and that will basically spoil your theory. So in principle, though you can choose any value of p, but in principle you will have to restrict up to 4. Okay. Sorry? This will be T. Because this is not a summation. I am just taking single term. Okay. So now just I am giving you the outline. I am not calculating every step. Okay. Right. So first of all, you will have to guarantee that epsilon is 2 less than 1 and eta is 2 less than 1. If you put those constants over here, so what you do? You know the expressions are epsilon in terms of v. Okay. Epsilon is d prime by v and eta is v double prime by v and or something like that. Okay. So you calculate from this v, you calculate v prime, v double prime, and you check whether they are less than 1. What are the constraints coming out of that? If both these two constraints, and these two constraints should be satisfied simultaneously. Okay. So if both of these two constraints are satisfied, then you can get first of all that phi is 2 greater than p and p. So this is the constraint coming out of that. So your scalar field, the value of that scalar field should be greater than Planck mass. Okay, and that is why these types of models, they are called super Planckian inflation, because the scalar field that is above Planck mass. So there are different. So that part basically I am trying to avoid, the particle physics part. That is, from here you will get that potential. Okay, there are different classifications like super Planckian, sub Planckian, and so on and so forth, depending on the values of everything. Okay, and you have this small field limit, large field limit, so on and so forth. Okay. So this, just the point is that since this scalar field is greater than MP, this is called super Planckian model. So all of these models, these power law potentials, they fall in the super Planckian scenario. Okay. So if this is the constraint, and you get back to your Friedmann equations, which are now simplified. Okay, what are the simplified Friedmann equations? The simplified Friedmann equations are h squared is of the order of 1 by 3 mp squared into v and 3h phi dot plus v prime is of. So now with this constraint, if you get back to your Friedmann equation, the first Friedmann equation alone can give you a solution that the scale factor is a, this is a constant, a end exponential minus phi square minus phi l square phi 2px. Okay, so you try to solve so you know the values of v and everything from here, okay, and you put this constraint over there, okay, and you try to find out information out of these two equations. So you have two unknowns basically, phi and a, and you have two equations, you can readily get the solution. Okay, so you choose any one to find out a and put that value In the second equation, you will find out your phi. Okay.
I wonder whether there is any time dependence on this solution.
Sorry?
Time dependence of this A.
Yeah.
It is not there.
Yeah, because right now I have not find out explicit solution. So you have two unknowns, A and phi. Okay. Phi is actually function of t. Because I am telling phi is basically rolling down. So there is time dependence involved over here, but I have not written it explicitly. That is not required either. As I said, explicit solution is not that important. Extracting physics is important. Okay, fine. So now you can check that you indeed have time dependence. So if you put this information into the other equation, then you can check that your phi basically comes out to be phi I exponential. Oh, sorry. There is an intermediate step over here. Okay, fine. Okay. So phi basically comes out to be one solution is phi equals phi I exponential minus 4 lambda by 3 with a root t minus I. This is for p equals 4. Okay, and for p not equals 4, you have a solution which is phi is 2 minus t by 2. But as you see this second equation, if you put p equals 4, then this blows up. That's why p equals 4 gives you a different solution. Okay, so this is phi I over. This is for. So now you can see readily the explicit dependence of t on phi. Okay. So what you do is that you have a variable t and you have two unknowns a and phi. You have two equations. You try to have simultaneous solution of those two equations. From any one equation you get a equals this. Basically from this equation you can get a because this is a mixed equation. From this equation you get a, you put that value over here, you get two values of phi. Why two values? Because as you can see, this is the general solution for p not, this is a general solution, and if you put p equals 4, then these terms basically blow off. So that's why for p equals 4 you have any other solution. Okay, and this solution explicitly takes care of t. So now if at all you want to have a as function of t, what you can do? You can put this value over here and you can get a as function of t.
I mean, there should be exponential in it.
Exponential is here. No, here you don't have any. Here you won't have any kind of exponential. Okay. So you just get back to home and you check that. Okay. So this is the solution. So fine. Okay. So to get at the end of the day, this is the desired result. As I said, first and foremost, I will have to satisfy three conditions. Okay. First and foremost, I need to satisfy these three conditions. That I have in fact satisfied that epsilon is 2 less than 1 and eta is 2 less than 1. That has basically given me these constraints, and which in turn resulted in these expressions of a and phi. Okay. And I can in principle get a as function of t if I put this value back into here. Now I am yet to satisfy the last constraint, that is the end of inflation constraint. Okay. So if I put that constraint onto this results, so these are the results right now, these are the results, and if I put that constraints, that end of inflation basically means, you have epsilon of the order of 1, or which in turn means m is of the order of 56 to 70. Okay, so this basically gives you phi end. You have to see, even if we have solutions, but we have two initial conditions which are yet to be fixed. That is phi end and phi I, we have not yet fixed. Those two initial conditions. Okay, we'll have to estimate. So phi end, from this constraint, phi end basically turns out to be PMP by root 2. If you put this constraint, once again. Is the point clear to everybody? I'm just skipping some steps. You know the expression for epsilon as function of v. Okay, and in this v you now put the expressions for phi, what you get from here. Okay, and you put the constant epsilon is equal to 1. That will lead to this constraint. That you will get the value of phi n. So all you are left with is to calculate phi I. If you can do that, then your model is done.
Here we have two conditions for phi, first condition is not equal to 4.
Yeah.
Which one is giving to this answer?
Actually, p not equals 4. So this is the general solution. For p equals 4, you will get a little bit different. Okay. So I am more or less bothered about this. This is a general result. Okay. And if you so the expression, so this is my phi n, and the expression for n phi, that turns out to be phi square by 2p n square minus p by 4. Okay. So you put that value 256 to 70, and that will really give you phi. Because you know in the expression of n you have this limit from phi I to phi n. Okay. Phi I to phi n. Okay. You determine this phi n and put that value over here. That will give you phi n. So now you can say I am happy. I am happy. At least I have seen that how you can propose an inflationary model using a typical kind of potential. How you can do that? Once again, let me repeat, because these are the things people usually get jumbled up. Okay. So how you can do that? First of all, given a potential, you choose your potential in such a way that you try to satisfy whether your epsilon is 2 less than 1 and eta is 2 less than 1 symmetry. Okay. And that will basically, so once you guarantee that thing, that will give you a constraint equation. And you put that constraint equation into your simplified Friedman equations, and that will give you two solutions, one for scale factor and another for your scale field. Okay. So now with this you try to derive your expression for number of p-foldings. Okay. So as you know, your end of p-foldings, that is the end of inflation, that is basically guaranteed by number of p-foldings 56 to 70, and your epsilon parameter is of the order of 1. So if you put this constraint, that will give you the one initial condition phi n, and if you put that constraint over the expression for n phi, that will give you the other initial constraint phi I. If they are consistent, if the values of phi I and phi n are consistent, then you can say you have already given a successful model of inflation. You have already guaranteed that there is a phase when the scalar field is actually slowly rolling down the potential, and at the same time there is a phase sometime later when inflation has peaked. You are guaranteed that. Okay. So all you are left with. So, and as I have said, there are thousands of models. So this is just an example. So given this prescription, you are now smart enough. Given a potential, you know how to calculate this. Okay. Any question? Okay, fine. So now the point which is left right now, which I will focus on throughout the rest of this course, because that is a rigorous thing to do, that is the structure formation. And as before I start, once again let me repeat why I am doing structure formation, because of two reasons. Okay. First and foremost, to explain from the initial homogeneous and isotropic universe, you actually get inhomogeneities, which you see in CMB at the earliest possible time, and at the same time you see in the cell structures.
So further it has to explain why this and how this matter in Platon matter converts into the ordinary matter.
That's it. That's what I will try to explain. Okay, I will try to explain that. So this is the point I am trying to focus. Okay, so formation of structure, explaining formation of structure really means how from this inflaton field you will gain those fields. Okay, so whatever matter or whatever you call radiation, everything, whatever you see today, okay, from where they have originated. Now, let me just give you the answer right now, since you are smart enough, that they have actually, in this paradigm, they have actually originated from this inflaton field. Okay, so whatever you see today, they have originated from this inflaton field through nucleosynthesis and everything. Okay, so I will try to show you gravitationally, from gravitational point of view, how from initial homogeneous and isotropic universe, you get those matters and radiations and everything studying from this synthesis paradigm, first and foremost. Okay, which will first of all convince yourself that actually you are on the right track of explaining your universe, first and foremost. And secondly, this will, what this will do, as I said, this will help you constraining inflationary models further. Okay, so that you can rule out lots of models and you can appreciate very few transfer models. Okay, so that's it I'm trying to focus on right now. Okay, let me just start because I don't have enough time to continue. So now I will basically explain what I call power relations. This is to answer to the fourth puzzle of standard okay. Structure for it. So now let us just explain a little bit. I will come to quantum fluctuations later on. Okay, first of all I will do it classically and then I will come to quantum mechanical business. Okay, because here you will have to address a little bit of quantum mechanics because as the to answer to his question, I will have to demonstrate how from inflaton field you actually get that. Okay, that is the quantum field theoretical approach, which I will discuss little bit later. Okay, first of all I will do the gravitational part, and from gravitationally first of all I will try to show you that you indeed have matter and radiation starting from initial homogeneous and isotopy. Okay, so I have two jobs left over here. First and foremost, to demonstrate that gravitationally you indeed have matter and radiation starting from initial homogeneous and isotopy universe, and then to show you how from inflaton you actually get those. So this is the second part. First and foremost, I will focus on this gravitational aspect. Okay, fine. So now the prescription is that, but let me just give you the prescription because once you don't know the prescription, you cannot understand the gravitational part as well. Okay. So now the prescription is that since inflaton is as I said, inflaton is a beyond standard model field. Okay. So the field at very high energy. As I said, this is so you can remember all of you can remember this thing. That any standard model field that cannot give you a double dot greater than 0, so inflaton must be beyond standard model field. So if this is a beyond standard model field, then it must be a quantum field. Okay, a field at very high energy. So if you have a quantum field, from quantum field theory you can readily show that it always has associated to it quantum fluctuations. The field which is residing at wave, it has some fluctuations kind of thing associated to it. Okay. So this inflaton field, a quantum fluctuations are always associated to this inflaton field. Okay, when I call it scalar field, when I have a classical field, it is at rest means it is at rest. Okay, but for a quantum field, when it is at rest, when it is even if it is at its wave, okay, you can have small fluctuations associated with that thing. It is fluctuating, little bit fluctuating. Okay, and these fluctuations basically emit wavelength. Okay, so if you express in Fourier component, so to say, for each phi you can associate phi k which are fluctuations. Okay, which are fluctuating at frequency omega k, or you can say they basically emit radiation with wavelength lambda. Emit wave, forget about radiation, emit wave with wavelength lambda k. Okay, so this is the general prescription. I am not demonstrating this thing right now. Okay, as I said, is the point clear? I am not skipping this part. I am just skipping this part for now. I will discuss this thing later. Okay, but this is the prescription which you need to know to study the gravitational field. The prescription is that for every quantum field you have quantum fluctuations which are fluctuating with wavelength lambda k. Okay, and when this quantity a into lambda k, now since you are doing in curved space, so you have a scale factor associated with it, the information of curvature. Okay, so when this is greater than your H inverse, what is your H inverse? Do you remember that thing? Forget about that thing. This is basically size of the horizon. Okay, so this is the size of the horizon. This is the initial size of the horizon. You have started. Okay, so when your A lambda k is greater than the H inverse, that means you have, this is my A lambda k. Okay, and at that time, since at the very beginning of inflation, at very early time of inflation, okay, then also your horizon size was pretty small. Okay, at that time the wavelength was larger than that thing. Okay, So if you don't, so you are an observer sitting over here. Okay, you have an information over here, and this is the wavelength. So you cannot get complete information about the wave. Okay, unless you can catch a complete wavelength, you cannot get complete information about the wave. The information is missed. Okay, so at that time, what I call in the language of cosmology, this is called horizon exit. So they basically exit the horizon, so to say.
So sir, when we are decomposing this high into this omega field, oscillator, and there are so many oscillators in different frequencies. So which one will consider here?
Exactly, that's a pretty good question. Which the modes which satisfy these two conditions. Okay, they only exit the horizon. Now description is that fortunately, so that is what I am trying to say here. Just I am telling the story at this point. Okay, I will explain quantum fluctuation later on, and then there I will show you explicitly that this happens. Okay, but right now I am just telling you the story to motivate you towards this dimensional business. Okay, so the story is like this. So the modes, and it happens to be sure these modes are basically relevant in formation of structures. Okay, the modes which satisfy these two conditions, when they satisfy these conditions, they basically exit horizon. Now what happens? During inflation, as you know, the size of the horizon increases hugely. Okay, so within a short while, this horizon size that basically increases up to this, and this basically succeeds in capturing the wave. Okay, so when you see after a very short while, when A lambda k that is less than H inverse, okay, they once again they re-enter the horizon. Okay, so this is what I call the exit horizon, these modes, exit horizon, and now they re-enter horizon. And these are the modes you capture in CMB. So whatever you see in CMB like this, whatever you see in CMB, the basic idea is that basically initially you had inflaton and it had got quantum fluctuations. Okay, during inflation. Okay, and these modes basically what they did, these fluctuations basically they had waves, so they just passed by. They were passing by. Okay, being unaffected. Now, at that time, your horizon size was pretty small. So, at that time, they could not catch, your horizon could not catch complete wave. Okay, so that is what I call the wave has exited the horizon. But within a short interval, during the end of inflation, your horizon size is pretty big. Now, they can catch a complete wave. So, once they catch a complete wave, they can get complete information out of it. Okay, so that those informations are basically being reflected here, and you see this. Okay, this is just the story. I will explain mathematically how we can get that thing later. Okay, fine. So with this motivation, what we will do is, and this is what happens. So let me just tell you. Okay, so I will come to that point later.
Here two things are happening parallelly and independently of each other. One is the high vibration, that means free vibration, and second is the
Exactly, and there is a competition between these.
Yes.
That's it. There is a competition. Okay. At the very early time of inflation, the wave basically wins over the horizon. But after a very short while, the horizon is strong enough. That has got a very huge size, so that basically catches the wave. And now they can say these are the waves you see in CMB. Okay, so these are the waves which basically give you the seeds of large scale perturbations. Okay.
So when the horizon gets larger and larger, this wavelength is assimilated in that.
Sorry?
The wavelength is assimilated in that completely.
This is not assimilated, they just capture the waves. So once you capture completely, like you go back to your class 2 kind of physics, how can you get a complete information about the wave? If you can capture a wave, a complete wavelength of the wave, getting information about at least one complete wavelength of the wave gives you complete information. If you get half the wave, then the information is lost. So now you can capture, since your universe has evolved to a great size, you can capture a complete wavelength. So you can extract complete information out of that.
So
Before that you had information, but you could not have extracted information.
So there may be some stages of this universe expansion when this n wavelength will touch with the origin of this universe.
Of course, there may be, but the thing is that here, as I said, first and foremost problem is that you cannot see what is happening beyond that. So you cannot exactly predict that thing. Okay, what happened at what time exactly. And secondly, the problem is that though I am talking about all these things and it appears to be a huge thing, it happened through a very short interval because the expansion was really fast. So even if the information is huge, the phenomenon happened very slowly. Okay, so that you cannot distinguish, you cannot have minute distinction between phenomena. Okay, so all you can have information is about the distinction between these two phases. What happened in between? What you say is perfect, but you cannot have ready-made information. That is the problem because things are happening very fast. So that's it. Let me stop here. And in the next class, what I will do in the post-lunch session, I will start from here. I will do gravitational business. So I will start from. So what I will do is that I will start from once again G mu nu is kappa T mu nu, initial homogeneous isotropic universe, and I will show that these quantum fluctuations basically result in fluctuations of this metric and fluctuation of T mu nu. Because these quantum fluctuations T mu nu is basically phi. Okay, so you have delta of T mu nu sitting over here, and you have delta of G mu nu sitting over here. And I will try to show you a relation between del G mu nu and del T mu nu, which will basically be reflected in C. Okay. After doing this, I will come down to this quantum fluctuation. Okay.